In the early 1970s, thousands of people were already living online. They logged in every day. They recognized usernames. They argued with strangers they had never met. They shared jokes. They shared secrets. They stayed up late, staring at glowing screens, waiting for replies. Some of them even fell in love. This wasn't science fiction, and it wasn't the modern internet. There were no browsers, no websites, no smartphones, no Wi-Fi. Most people on Earth had no idea this world existed, because this online society was hidden inside universities, running on massive mainframe computers, connected by thick cables, displayed on orange plasma screens that looked nothing like today's devices. It had chat, it had forums, it had private messages, it had notifications, it had multiplayer games, it even had early forms of emojis, and then it vanished. Not because it failed, not because people didn't want it, but because the world outside wasn't ready to let it grow. For a brief moment in the 1970s, the internet already existed. Only a few thousand people were allowed inside, and almost no one remembers it. The system was called PLATO, and it may be the most important digital future we ever lost. PLATO didn't start as a social experiment. It started as an educational one. In the early 1960s, computers were rare, expensive, and intimidating. They lived in locked rooms. Only specialists were allowed near them, and almost no one imagined they could be personal. At the University of Illinois, a small group of researchers had a radical idea. What if computers could teach? What if students could interact with them? What if learning didn't have to be passive? They built a system that allowed students to log in, answer questions, receive feedback, and progress at their own pace. That system was called PLATO. At first, it was simple: text-based lessons, basic interaction, nothing that looked revolutionary. But then something unexpected happened. The students didn't just use PLATO to learn, they used it to talk. Someone wrote a message to another user, someone replied, someone else joined the conversation, and suddenly the computer wasn't just a teaching machine, it was a place. As PLATO evolved, the technology did something almost no one predicted. It became social. By the early 1970s, PLATO terminals were nothing like the computers most people imagined. They had high-resolution plasma displays, they supported graphics, they could show multiple windows of information, and more importantly, they were connected. Every terminal talked to every other terminal in real time. Students began building tools on top of the system. They created message boards where anyone could post. They created private messaging systems. They created shared spaces where discussions never really ended. One of these tools was called PLATO Notes. It was a forum system, but calling it a forum undersells what it was. Notes had threads, replies, mentions, public conversations, private spaces. People formed groups, they developed reputations, they argued, they trolled, they moderated. Sound familiar? This was happening years before the personal computer existed. PLATO users developed a culture, they invented slang, they invented etiquette, they invented ways of expressing emotion using symbols and characters. They even invented early emojis, not because someone told them to, but because human communication demanded it. And then came the games. PLATO users didn't just play alone, they played together. In the early 1970s, PLATO hosted multiplayer games where dozens of people competed simultaneously. One of the most famous was called Empire. It was a networked strategy game, multiple players, shared maps, real-time interaction. People coordinated, they betrayed each other, they formed alliances. This was online multiplayer gaming before the internet, and it wasn't niche. Some users spent hours every day logged in. They scheduled their lives around access to terminals. They waited for others to come online. PLATO wasn't just a tool, it was a community. And for many, it felt more real than the offline world around them. People formed friendships that lasted decades. Some met in person years later and felt like they already knew each other. One former user later said something striking. "It felt like the future had arrived, but only for us." And that was the problem. PLATO was expensive. The terminals were custom-built. The computers were massive. The infrastructure was centralized. This wasn't something you could put in a living room. This wasn't something you could sell cheaply. PLATO lived in institutions, universities, research centers, a few forward-thinking schools. And while the people inside PLATO understood exactly what it was becoming, the world outside didn't. To outsiders, PLATO looked like an educational system, a teaching aid, a niche academic project. They didn't see the social layer. They didn't feel the community. They didn't understand what it meant to log in every day and be part of something larger. And most importantly, they didn't see a business model. As the 1970s turned into the 1980s, personal computers began to appear. Cheap, standalone, disconnected. They didn't have PLATO's network, they didn't have its community, but they had something PLATO didn't: accessibility. Anyone could buy one. And slowly, quietly, the center of gravity shifted. PLATO kept growing in capability, but it didn't spread. It was trapped inside the institutions that funded it. When budgets tightened, terminals were removed. When priorities shifted, systems were shut down. When newer technologies appeared, PLATO was seen as old, despite being more advanced socially than almost anything that followed. By the late 1980s, the world was discovering bulletin board systems, then early internet forms, then email for the masses. People celebrated these as breakthroughs. Few realized they were reinventing something that already existed. When the World Wide Web arrived in the 1990s, it exploded outward, but it was lonely at first. No profiles, no communities, no social identity. Those came later. PLATO had them decades earlier, and by then, PLATO was almost gone. The system that had pioneered online life quietly shut down terminal by terminal. No grand ending, no global announcement, just silence. The people who had lived inside it carried the memory with them. Many described it as losing a home. And here's the part that hurts the most. PLATO didn't fail because the idea was wrong. It failed because it was too early. Too early for cheap computers, too early for widespread networks, too early for a society that understood digital identity. The technology worked, the people loved it, the world simply wasn't ready to scale it. Today, we live inside the future PLATO previewed. Social feeds, online arguments, communities that never sleep, friends we've never met, games that connect millions. But we built it again, slowly, imperfectly, and with consequences no one fully anticipated. PLATO showed what online life could feel like before algorithms, before ads, before monetization. It was messy, human, chaotic, and deeply social. For a brief moment, humanity stepped into the future, and then stepped back out. The internet didn't arrive once, it arrived early, quietly, inside a glowing orange screen, and we weren't ready to keep it.